The cheapest local marketing costs nothing, $0. The next cheapest is just pocket change. And I learned that the expensive way. Let me dive into that for you. So in 2009, it was shortly after the real estate bubble. I lost everything. I was working at a call center that had an internet marketing software. Think about Shopify, great grandpa, right? And I learned internet marketing there. And I was eventually able to transition into working at a law firm as the marketing director. Now, the law firm had built their entire business by putting their name and phone number on the back cover of the phone book. So they built their business on the phone book. So they were pretty committed to the phone book. However, the previous marketing director and the owner of the law firm had a similar skill set, and so they fought all the time. And so when they hired me, the criteria was that I had to know the internet and I had to be under 30. I was 29 at the time, so fortunately it worked out. But after a little while, what I started to learn is that I didn't really get a lot of support from the owners in the business. And it makes sense because they had built the business using these other strategies. The internet was getting probably, I don't know, maybe 2% of the overall budget for the company, the marketing budget, and it was getting probably a similar amount of the results. And so when I came in, I was tasked with growing the internet marketing campaign. But I was just getting so much resistance from the leadership of the company. And so what I did is when I would go to them and say, look, I need $20,000 to do this, and they say, you're not getting anything and any results, so obviously you can't have the money. And so what I figured I needed to do is I needed to start tracking my results to go to them. Now, here's the thing. You think about the internet, you say, oh yeah, obviously you should be tracking results. This was 2000, I think, 12. And this was way back in the beginning. All this fancy tracking that we have now wasn't really around at the time, but I did something different. So in traditional advertising, the way that they like to track results is through tracking phone calls, right? You go to these guys like, oh, I got so many website visits. They don't care. They don't understand that. And so what I had to do is I had to figure out, how do I track my results in a way that they will accept? So they looked at phone calls. Such and such lead source got this many phone calls. This phone book got that many phone calls. The inside of this phone book got this many phone calls versus the back cover of that same book got this many phone calls. And you did this by putting different phone numbers in those different places. So for example, we were in the 801 area code. We would have an 801 area code phone number on the back. We would have an 801 phone number on the inside. If we had a quarter page ad on the inside, we'd have a different phone number than if we had a half page ad. And sometimes in the back cover, we would have 4 tracking numbers on the back cover of the ad. The reason why is because when you're going to, with phone books, they used to be outrageously expensive. They were crazy expensive, right? But so when you go to negotiate these contracts, you're spending $80,000 per month on the phone book. It's crazy. You want to be able to go in and say, oh, my quarter page isn't working, cut that. My half page isn't working, cut that. The back cover is the only thing that's working. Let's cut everything else and get on and buy another directory, right? And so you want to be able to optimize for those things. And the only way you can do that with phone numbers is to put a different phone number on each place that your ad appears. And then at the end of the month, you count the number of calls it got. Now you can do different things where you say, I don't want to consider anything that's under 3 minutes, or anything that comes in and doesn't go past the receptionist. That one's challenging because then you actually got to listen to all the calls and do all that stuff. But that is the way that the tracking worked now and back then. Phone calls are very important for local businesses. Not so much necessarily online business, especially if people check out through a shopping cart. But for local businesses, phone calls is pretty much the way that people track. And so what I did is I got unique phone numbers and I put them on our Google everywhere. If we were advertising on KSL.com, a news website, I'd have a phone number on there. If we were doing something else, I'd put a phone number on there. And that way I could just count the calls. What I also did is I went in and I was spending about 20 grand a month on SEO, right? It was insane. And so I'd have tracking numbers on the website, right? Those phone numbers would be different than our PPC landing pages. And I put tracking phone numbers on our Google Places listing. Now, Google Places has gone by different things: Google Maps, Google Local, thinking now it's called Google My Business. They'll probably change the name again. They might have even changed it since the time I make this video. But when I was doing it, it was called Google Places, right? And so think, you go to Google, you type in pizza, and it shows you a map with 3 businesses. That is Google Places, Google Maps. That's what I'm talking about, the local pack. And so when I put these tracking phone numbers on there, I was absolutely blown away by what I saw. I found that almost all of our phone calls from the internet were coming from Google Places. Almost all of them. It's insane. It was crazy because I was spending about $40,000 a month on PPC, and I was getting a lot of traction from that. I was getting a lot of phone calls, a lot of chats, a lot of form submissions. I was getting great results from that. But I was spending $20,000 a month on SEO. And SEO, people have defined it a lot of different ways over time, but the nuts and bolts is SEO is you do something to a page on your website so that it shows up higher in the search results on Google. You could make the argument that SEO is anything where you're trying to improve results in a search engine. It's pretty vague and not really helpful, but the typical definition of SEO, you do something to a page trying to get it to rank higher in Google. And so one thing that you find is that especially with local results. Now, this doesn't necessarily work with national things. If that map doesn't show up, then none of what I'm saying matters. If it does show up, completely different strategy. Because if you go and you search for estate planner near me, right, you're going to see, especially if you do it on your phone. If you do it on your desktop, it's still like this, but it's just not as stark as if you're doing it on your phone. So you go estate planner near me. You're going to see first of all, the logo in the search bar. You see 3 ads. Then you're going to see the map, the local pack, local listings. Then you're going to see one of those frequently asked questions or people also asked. There may be another thing, and then they show the organic listings, right? Now, there was this eye tracking study that was done a long time ago, and this was on desktop. You can't necessarily prove that it's the same for the phone, although I don't know why it would be. But when the page loaded on desktop, they tracked where people's eyes were looking on the page, and it started at the top, and by the time it got to the bottom of the page, nobody was looking at those listings at all. And so on page 2, almost nobody is looking on page 2. The idea is that if you're not showing at the top of the organic results, you're getting no results whatsoever. That's just how it works, right? And so now those results are pushed down past the paid ads, past the maps, past the people also asked. Then if there's nothing else on there, then it gets into the organic listings. So for local businesses, it wouldn't surprise me at all if hardly anybody actually scrolls down far enough to look at those things. Almost everybody is either looking at the ads or looking at the map, okay? And so when I put my tracking numbers on there, I was getting an unbelievable number of calls. It was like my budget was $500,000 a month. And so for $500,000 a month, I was getting something like 280 calls or something like that. But with Google Maps, I was getting about 360 calls a month for free. It cost nothing to do that. Nothing. So if you're a local business without a huge marketing budget, where do you start? Right there. Now you can do SEO optimization on the maps section. It's a totally different strategy than with the organic listing. Of course, the organic being the part below the ads, below the map, below the frequently asked questions. Then you get into the organic listings. Totally different strategy, but you can still do something to impact where you show up inside that map listing. There are agencies you can hire to help with that. I hate that. Agencies are horrible, in my opinion. But yeah, that's where I would focus. Now, if you're going to do paid ads, I would recommend that you do Facebook ads. Now, when you think about Facebook ads, you might think, oh, I've tried that before and it didn't work. You haven't tried it the way that I do it. And I've never really seen people do it the way that I teach it. And so I can see why everybody's frustrated. But in a different video, I am going to be showing you how to actually make those ads to get the results. And as a matter of fact, if you click on the link in the description, you can go and actually download the lesson that costs $30 million for me to learn. And it's an extension of this video and what we talked about, just in more detail, and explains how to solve that. So thank you so much for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks.